talking stick if you
Thank you.
the relevance of that.
Right. I'll greet you in an African fashion, if I may, and I'll raise my voice because, as Ron said, of the ambient sound. Sanbonani, Dumelang, Morweni, Abarigani, Gunjani, Salama, and I think, as importantly, how's it? Friends, in my hand, I have Induguzuk Pefomula, which in the Southern Nguni language would simply mean the stick that gives you the power to breathe words, memory stick. And this stick lives behind the Land Rover seat on all our adventures going back well over 30 years, a lifetime really. And when sitting with chiefs and indunas and friends and others, sometimes not knowing quite what to say, sometimes negotiating for your safety even, out comes the old Induguzo Pefomula. It goes back several generations in our family. And who knows, it might have even, you see the old Zulu head-ringed warrior sign from the old Zulu days. Who knows, it might even date back to the Battle of 1879, Sign-Tronic or Rock's Drift. Induguzo Pefomula, the talking stick. So who knows what the talking stick will deliver this evening, because it never prepares anything, Adrian. But let me start by just taking Adrian and Anne and Roberto. Where are you, Roberto?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. And you, Roberto, thank you for having me here over the show. You could well ask, what would an old grey beard of a modern-day explorer be doing at a print show? And I think we should discuss that right in the beginning. I'm here to say thank you to Adrian and Roberto and Ron for the great work that they've done for us in terms of allowing us to do more for children's conservation in Africa. How would a print business with these really wonderful machines help in that way? Well, the offcuts from these big printing machines are used to cut out wild animals, albeit, say, half size. So you'll have a hippo, an elephant, a rhino, a crocodile, a hyena, a warthog, you name them. And then these are delivered, sometimes because they're a little large to fit into the Land Rovers, we'll simply cut them in half and then duct tape them together and put them in a big carry bag. Can you imagine the delight in the children's faces when you get to Matusadona, for example, in Zimbabwe, or you get to Zakuma in Chad, or albeit it might just be Hluhluwe and Ampolozi or Tembe Elephant Reserve, or even Gorongosa in Mozambique. And you get to these tiny little schools, and Swazi knows this story so well. You get to these tiny little schools, and they're the early child development, you know, the little pre-primary schools. No paint, broken windows, gutters hanging, no JoJo tank, no fence. Out gets the expedition team. It's so great. Carry the paints, carry the brushes, carry the rollers, all the stuff, involve the local people. And next minute, up on the walls go these stencils made by Sign-Tronic. Kids can't believe it. Little snot nose will come outside, 5 years old. Wow, we've got a lesson on the page outside. There's just a random, here's little Pembesis for a crash. That's what it looked like, day one. Day two, day three, the opening. Can you believe this crash in Mkuzi in northern Zululand? It was called Big Five. It was an old prefab building, no color. All the paint fading and flaking, no hope for these little kids. Overnight, it is the Big Five. The giraffes, the numbers, the names, and that's just one of a few. We have 125 of these crashes on our books, marching slowly forward as we try and do this work. So can you imagine when those templates, by the way, the zebra's a bit of a difficult one, you can imagine. You know, the legs and the colors and all that. And so you march on there. Isn't it lovely that the rhino, in so many instances, gets colored in the colors of the South African flag? And you know, we've noticed that across Africa. Elephants colored in the flag of Chad. In Botswana, a rhino colored in the flag of Botswana, showing patriotism. So that emanates out of these machines. Thanks, Ron. in Durban, and it's just so fantastic. A simple thing. I don't think anyone had quite thought of it before, and Ron came up with the idea. Thank you, Ron. Because the old freehand style was great, but sometimes a hippo looked a bit like a rhino. Some of our artists weren't all that great. But now apply the template, and there you have all these lovely animals. And what goes beyond that, as you know, Ron, are the figures, the numbers and the letters. Tembe Sizwe crash. It doesn't even have a sign on the wall. Just that. That's all it is. How simple. Up it goes, down a ladder, marks it, get a little bit crooked. And then as they get more expert, let's say this is painted bright red, and then the guy with a little black paintbrush does the border. You know how lovely it looks, eh? The next day or 3 days later, those kids come to school, they cannot believe what's happened. Sometimes we leave the templates behind. It's like recently we've been in Malawi. We've been on a wonderful journey. We've just got back from it. Later, some of you might like to study the paper map that's on the bonnet of this wonderful old Land Rover TDI, 300 TDI, that did the first journey of its kind. And it's here thanks to Trevor. Up with your hand there, wave your cap, brother. Thanks here to Trevor. The first Land Rover of its kind ever to track the entire outline of Africa through 449 days, 33 countries. I see it did 64,327 tire revolutions, tens of thousands of potholes, hundreds of campfires, 1 million farts on the Melville and Moon seat covers. Who put that? Yes, a great journey, Trev. And here this old girl is sitting. But later on, you'll see a paper map on the bonnet. And we're leaping forward because the paper map is the journey that we've just got back from 2 weeks ago. And that journey was to link all of the African parks managed areas across 22 parks across Africa. Years ago, as you'll recall, some of these parks had absolutely no hope. None at all. Take Sakuma in the southeastern corner of the Republic of Chad. The Janjaweed, the devils on horseback from Darfur, would come and take out 100 elephants at a time with automatic fire. Over 100 people on horseback. The Chinese waiting in Khartoum to buy the ivory. No hope. In come this non-profit organization called African Parks. We start to hear about them. We meet with them. Swazi knows the story. They take over these parks in partnership with government. Obviously, they have to raise a lot of money. Their annual budget for 22 parks, encompassing more than 20 million hectares of land under protection, is 130 million US dollars. They raise the money because they do well, and the world has got to see how it can be done properly. KwaZulu-Natal, sadly, lost over 300 rhinos last year. And then you wander into a little park in the south of Malawi called Majeti, and it hasn't lost a rhino or an elephant in 20 years. Stories of hope for Africa should be the theme that the Talking Stick delivers here this evening. Because we came back from that journey, 1 year, 60,000 Ks, in new Defenders, the big 130s. Well, a bit of a difference there from these old girls. And we came back with stories of hope, where in some of these very remote areas, I'll just give one example. Let's take Rwanda after the genocide. Akagera, its Big Five Park, was absolutely ruined. Some of you will know the story. There wasn't a lion left. There was more snares than animals. And an organization with hope moves in. Today there's Big Five, and how proud it makes one feel to wander around Akagera and see your Zululand rhinos. And how proud one feels when you hear that 46% of the people visiting the park happen to be black Rwandese. They arrive in shiny parks, cars rather, and book and stay in lodges. And the cooperatives around the park, fish farming, dairy farming, you name it, all just get involved in being part of the park. And the one story that I'd like to share with you, because it goes hand in hand with the templates and the stencils, is if you don't involve communities with conservation, we're dead. And years ago, some of you will remember that iconic conservationist, Dr. Ian Player. What a grand gentleman he was. He saved the last of the southern white rhinos. As you know, he sent them all around the world. And with Yolandi and Ron, I remember we organized a rhino summit. We brought 300 kids from around the world. We brought them from Southeast Asia. We brought them from China, brought them from Indonesia, brought them from the countries that buy rhino horn. And we had this summit all about rhinos, where the first rhinos were darted in Tlhotliwi. And you know what was special about that day? There was old Ian Player, and when he was in his last legs, it was his very last public address. We had to load him into a wheelchair. We had a mate with a helicopter who brought him in, and we sat him down at the old bush airstrip there in Umphalazi. And it was just dead quiet. All these kids from around the world. And he talked about the early days of conservation and how we have to keep this alive. And then he said, I'm handing the baton of conservation over to you guys. Because he says, if you don't give it to the kids, if you don't share it with the children of the future, we are absolutely doomed. And I think that was the sort of mantra that pushed us to carry on. So, coming back once from Mogadishu and Somalia, getting back here in 2013, the absolute spark of the rhino poaching. What could blokes like us do? You know, are we going to take flak jackets and shoot at poachers? That's past that. But what could we do? And thinking about Dr. Ian Player's words of the need to pass the baton of conservation over to the youth, we did a journey simply called Izindaba Zobombo to track the Lebombo range of mountains all the way from Crook's Corner in the north of the Kruger National Park, where Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and South Africa meet. Follow that range of mountains, which you'd probably better know as the Lubombos. Izindaba Zobombo in Zulu. Do you know that if you do a rectangle around that mountain range, it's the largest piece of Africa? It houses the largest number of rhinos, wild rhinos in the world. Dash. Or did it? What could we do? Talking stick, old Land Rovers, some blokes on bicycles, someone's on foot. You know, adventure's got energy, hasn't it? Boys with their toys. What tires do you use? What differentials? What roof rack? But how lovely if you can take that adventure, that magic of adventure, that boys with their toys, that sort of macho thing, and how if you can soften it by doing good stuff. So on this journey, our passport to visit the schools, as Yolandi knows so well, was a simple A3 piece of paper. On it was the outline of a rhino. The Nguni words on top simply read, Siyabathanda ukuphetshana, we love our rhinos. And then a little bit of English, let our voices be heard. And that went from school to school to school. First, you would deliver the paper, you come back a week later, and you do the judging. There, thank you. Good enough. What's nice to see, and Ron just took a random piece here. This comes out of the Congo. The art is in French. Isn't that lekker? Yeah, thanks, Ron. That gives you a pair. So each kid gets the A3, they color it in, and most importantly, they write a message on the bottom. How about the crayons and the art materials? I was telling Anne, where's Anne, just yesterday. You know, you get to some of these schools, these little kids haven't seen a highlighter before. They haven't seen a Koki. They stab at the paper like it's a spear or a knife. And then, you know, you sit with them. So it's not just about wildlife. It's also about an art lesson. How about a bit of blue for the sky? And what about those aloes in the, and what about that mountain in the background? What about the river where the rhinos drink, or the elephants, or the wildlife? Thanks, Ron. It's just so lekker. And this, once again, where Ron and his team have been so helpful with the printing. A simple A3 piece of paper, an outline of an elephant or a rhino, or some of the others is just simply wildlife. On this journey, we did our first chimpanzee art. Can you imagine, in the Nyungwe forest of Rwanda? And then you go back and judge the art. Yes, that is just so lovely. 10 prizes. soccer balls, little rucksacks, whatever you can get, whatever you are able to scrounge, and then followed by a soccer game. And what does the man of the match win? A bicycle. So he might have been in the losing team, but he wins a bicycle. That's just so like the energy. And then the winning kids, they get chosen to go to a 3-night, 4-day wildlife camp. And they walk with elephants and rhinos. And they see dung beetles. And they see impala and kudu and nyala. And then they get their little certificate. And then they become ambassadors. Is this a silver bullet that's going to change Africa? No. Just doing our best. Using the talking stick, using these old landies, using passion. And using so many people like yourself to say, if we're going to do these adventures, let's turn them into doing a whole lot of good stuff. And that's what I wanted to share with you around this campfire. If we just pretend we're sitting around a campfire in the Kalahari for a minute, the largest vegetated mantle of sand in the world. In the distance, the roar of a black-maned lion, cackle of a hysterical hyena, the cry of a black-backed jackal. You know why they used to be called roy jackals. And then they started sleeping under the old landies, a bit of oil leak. They got called black-backed jackal. Yeah. So, you know, my friends, we could tell so many stories here this evening around the campfire. One story, one adventure would roll into the other. This expedition that we've just completed is number 41. Journeys that have done the entire outline of Africa, journeys that have gone around the world on 23, 27, the Tropic of Capricorn, journeys that have taken us to the 7 important points of Africa, namely, you know, Cape Agulhas, the southernmost point. We did a dash from there, sure, all the way to the Arctic Circle, hot Cape to cold Cape. Journeys that have taken us around the world on the Tropic of Capricorn, journeys that have followed the great African Rift Valley all the way from Djibouti, the Gulf of Tajora, all the way west and east African Rift Valleys, ending where on Lake Rima, in Gorongosa in Mozambique. And there was a Belgian bloody botanist there, you know, quite a strict guy, a scientist. He said, what are you guys going to do tomorrow? We've been traveling for a year. Can you imagine what we looked like? The entire great African Rift Valley. I said, you know, the Zulu calabash of water. We've collected little bits of water from every single watercourse down the great African Rift Valley, all the way from the Gulf of Tajora, all the way from the deepest point in Africa, Lake Assar. We've taken it all the way to the largest volcanic lake on the top of a volcano in Eritrea. And I said, we're going to empty it into your Lake Orima. He's not he says. He said, not a damn. So I'm not having water taken from all those bloody places, you know, where it's yellow and brown and green and everything. Woo, you know, traveling Africa as we've done, we've learned to negotiate. Eh? I said, if we boiled it overnight. So I remember it went into a big camp kettle run. And the next day we walked through 75,000 water buck. And we emptied that water that were taken all the way from the Red Sea into the Gulf of Arima. And on all those journeys, and Ron will share some of the pics with us, they've all been used to use adventure to improve and save the lives of others. Maybe you've got a malaria slide here. We've talked about the art, talked about the conservation, but you know, we've been hammered by malaria. So I've had malaria more than 60 times, nothing to be proud of. Our whole team have been hammered by malaria. We've lost a guy's died in the Land Rover. So we took it upon ourselves, and here's just 2 random pictures. This one's funny enough from the Congo as well. We took it upon ourselves to distribute life-saving mosquito nets, long-lasted treated, to pregnant mothers and to mothers with children under the age of 5. And I'm so proud to have Swazi here with us, Swazi and Nkosi, who has actually sponsored the malaria work as part of their efforts with Land Rover. I think that's worth a round of applause, Swazi. Thank you. Swazi, as you know, when we started this work, a child was dying for every 30 seconds around the clock, day and night, from the blood-sucking bite of the Anopheles mosquito. And now, what's so wonderful, it's like every 3 minutes that a child dies. Not that that sounds great, but there's been enormous progress in this regard. And in the south of Mozambique, thanks, Ron. In the south of Mozambique, we've also joined forces with Nando's and others with Goodbye Malaria. indoor residual spraying that in some areas adjacent to the Kruger National Park has reduced malaria by 72%. It makes a big difference if you're holidaying in those areas. And then there's one that Ron just loves. Hey, Ron.
My favorite.
Ron's favorite. Don't we just take sight for granted? So, you know, you go into a chemist shop, 1.75, and out you walk. Quite proud, sort yourself out. But you know, when you're in these very remote areas, the quality of people's lives just folds because they can't see. And this project is named after my late wife. It's a tribute to her. Her name was Mashozi. And we were traveling around the world on the Tropic of Capricorn at that time, as I mentioned, and we got to Parana province in Brazil. And we asked by the Parks Department to go and evict an old man who was living on his own next to the Parana River. Off we went like that. You get out of here, he was told. But he was such a kindly old bloke. And then Mashozi looked at him. He was trying to light a match to make us some fire. Cook us, boil us some coffee. And Mashozi said, all this guy needs is a pair of reading glasses. And she dug in her bag, and just by absolute fluke, by total coincidence, she's produced the right strength of spectacles. He put it on, he lit the fire, we got our coffee, he was allowed to stay. But Shozi was a very strong character, as you all know, for those of you who met her. She said, Kingsley, I don't care if you have to bond the house, I don't care what you have to sell, but it's unfair that people's quality of life should be so reduced for the lack of a simple pair of spectacles. Yo, we came back from that one and we just hit it. You know, we got all the charts, and then we started to get good at it. I could look at you. Well, firstly, you take a person's age. You deduct 35 from that, you divide by 10, you get the eye spec. But that's us Mzungus. Yeah, because of too much iPhone and all that. The Africans got so much better eyesight, but you use that as a guideline. And then those people who are literate, you have a bottle of colorful beads. You have a bead needle and some bead thread. And then there's an old master lady with two teeth like that, and she, for the last 30 years, has been selling beads to tourists to make a living, and now she can't do anything. And all of a sudden, you get the strength right, 2.75. And she takes the needle, and she's got blue, green, red, yellow beads in the palm of her hand, and she just picks them up like this, and this grin. And the kids and the family around her go, yay, they've got their life back as well. So isn't it just lovely? You know, right to sight, art, conservation with the kids, the malaria work. And, you know, that right to sight, I shared this story actually with Adrian last night. Went out for a wonderful meal. Thank you, Adrian. Somewhat different from sitting around the campfire. But I'd like to share the story. We're in the Great African Rift Valley in the Tugan Hills. And we're in an old trading store with a broken roof. And we were sitting there, and an old fellow came with one leg and a homemade crack. Whole crowd standing around. And I said, what happened to you, brother? He said, a tractor ran over my leg. I couldn't farm anymore. So I said, what did you do? He said, I became the village cobbler. I started fixing shoes for everybody. I said, and then? He said, I can't see anymore. How tragic. He said, I can't see anymore. So we did the various tests, you know. If you're literate, you've got the ones with the hands, and you've got all the stuff with the boards and everything like that. And there's a lot of humor always there. You know, some of these old people are just so grand. Anyway, suddenly he can see. And he shouts to his grandson, bring my stuff. And the grandson comes running across the road with an anvil, a half-finished shoe, the thread still hanging from it, the needle, the pair of pliers, and the hammer. And the old bloke gets to work fixing a shoe again. His life has started all over again, and the people in the community go, yeah, he got his life back for a simple pair of bloody reading glasses. So those are just stories that I wanted to share with you that emanate from me being here tonight, sharing this campfire with you, to thank Adrian and his team for the good work that you do with regard to those wildlife stencils. A talking stick is going to throw the floor open now, I think, Ron, if that's okay. Do you want to? Okay, I beg your pardon. The stick going on,
there's such a loss of the quality of life for most elderly people as their eyesight starts to fail. They feel isolated, they don't feel part of the community, and they withdraw. You can just walk into a pharmacy and you're out of there in 10-15 minutes with a pair of readers in your pocket. The areas that we go to, there are no such facilities. So the quality of life just suffers so badly. That shouldn't be like that. Something that we so take for granted. The right to sight. Moshozi's right to sight was started by my late wife, Jill Holgate. Her Zulu name was Moshozi. We were traveling to track the Tropic of Capricorn around the world. We got to a place on the Piranha River where the local wildlife authorities were on a journey to find an old character that was becoming a danger to himself, and we saw how he struggled just to light a match. And Moshozi said all that he's suffering from is poor-sightedness, and she dug in her handbag and was just lucky that she had exactly the right strength. In no time at all, he lit the match and made us a cup of coffee. And the result has been over 250,000 pairs of readers given out. We're hugely privileged to have traveled to every single country on the African continent over some 30-odd years. It's one thing to go on these great adventures, but to do that without a sense of purpose would seem incomplete. Because I guess adventuring can be selfish. When you can use these adventures to improve the lives of others, it takes on a different dimension. And of course, it's a tribute to Moshozi, who so believed that this was something worthwhile to do, and how right she was. My name is Kingsley Holgate. I'm a modern-day adventurer who uses these adventures to improve and save lives.
Congratulations to Ron's daughter. She's a documentary maker, and she filmed that on a phone. And actually, her work gets presented in the annual film festivals, done great stuff on the San Bushman people. So, Ron, that's really nice. I see you've got one more. Have you got one more? We could crack it with that last one. I think it's quite energetic. That'll sort of draw things. And then maybe just a few questions and end the talking stick. Maybe during the video, if anyone needs a drink. I'd hate anyone to die first during the session. Thank you.
Before we go this, King always gets asked by everybody, how do you start an adventure and how do you go about it? King's got 4 prophetic words to answer that, King.
So yes, a lot of young people, and Trevor, you'll also relate to this. A lot of young people come to you and say, how could we possibly adventure? You know, like the vehicles are very expensive, and what about all the superstructure? Of course, we try and steer them towards Land Rover, Swazi. But you know, there's some of these young people that say, how could we possibly adventure? And I say, well, try this, and I'll get to the 4 words. Firstly, have a mission, have a clear objective. On that day, 28th of February, I'm going to cross Africa, and I'm going to climb 12 of the highest peaks. Give it a name. There's no danger in bragging to your mates at a bra. You know that on the 28th of Feb. And Adrian's like that. 28th of Feb, we're going to Greece, whatever. And
We are.
and you know, you start talking about it. You start visualizing it. You go to your print shop. You even do a logo. And you stick it on the landy door or whatever. And then sometimes you're the most surprised person on earth when you like look behind you and you're heading for Cairo. Because somehow that energy builds up and you do it. But then I say to young people, but you know what the most important thing is? And they like, look at me hoping for like a big solution. And I say, try turning the key. Can talk as much as we like, go to as many bars as we like. It's that day that you take the car keys out of your pocket, insert them in the ignition, or these days press the button for the car. But it's all about turning the key, and it's that day that you leave. And Ron loves that story because sometimes we'll be thinking about something. I said, let's make it Friday, turn the key. And I just think it's probably a lesson for all of us. It's so easy to procrastinate, I guess, as we as the beards get grey and we all get a little bit older. But yes, just get out there and turn the key. Are you going to fire away there?
Recognize this landy and a lot of this footage. This landy.
Singer, with a secret diviner, and a traditional calabash, mark the beginning of another adventure for Kingsley Holgate. He is considered Africa's modern-day explorer, and for good reason. He has circumnavigated the Makharikari salt pans in Botswana and the world's largest desert lake, Turkana, in northern Kenya. He's traveled from Cape to Cairo on Africa's waterways and negotiated the length of the great Zambezi River. Interrogated by UNITA, kept under surveillance by Tutsis, this is Kingsley Holgate's life.
We're not conquerors. We're not imperialists. We see ourselves as Africans trying to know more about this wonderful continent. Somehow would feel unfinished if we didn't use these expeditions to improve and save lives. I've had malaria more than 50 times. I know about the suffering that can go on in people's lives. And that's why we've chosen the initiatives and the work that we do.
I'm in Uganda with Nurse Layla to try and understand the effect that malaria can have on families in Africa. How old is he?
3 years. Bless him.
His grandma left home at 3 o'clock this morning to get to hospital. She carried him for 9 hours.
As you can see now, he's convulsing and he's on a drip, as you can see, which should be fighting the malaria, but they need to keep an eye on him to make sure that the convulsions kind of calm down and he gets his breathing sorted. But as you can see, with his little hand going, he looks so drained, doesn't he? Well, let's hope. Let's hope he's okay.
Every day, this ward is full of little children like McCabe, fighting for their lives against malaria. A fight they don't always win.
We just stepped outside for a break, and we just saw a couple run out, crying. We basically just asked, and the baby just died. I can't actually watch it.
Children die every day. Now we have lost 3 of them today. Yeah.
3 children died. I'll fix our boy now. Make sure he's alright.
In the short time I've been outside, McCabe has died. It's crazy. I know a 5-pound mosquito net could have protected McCabe and all the other children here against malaria.
It doesn't really matter that it's miles away from where you live, or where I live. Kid's a kid, isn't it?
believe me, it's like a stud to the heart. When you get to a village and you hear a mother screaming, there's a baby dying, nobody knows what to do. It's 200 miles by dugout canoe to the nearest clinic or hospital, and you think that these are lives that can be saved by education and a simple mosquito net, and that's why we do what we do. Education, and every mum here will receive a pamphlet, the same pamphlets that we distribute at schools. In this case, they're in the Swahili language. Shida Didia Malaria. In other words, in English, that would be, let us win against malaria. Land Rover, we salute you. This humanitarian work would not happen without your support. And as always, it's left with great jubilation by the local inhabitants here in this village in Savoy. Instant gratification, the joy on the people's faces. And out there, where there's nothing, a pair of reading glasses makes such a difference. It's life-changing, and the joy and the appreciation makes it all worthwhile.
To almost double by now. It's a bit of an old video.
Hundreds of thousands of people die from waterborne diseases in Africa, and we know that on expedition dysentery can break even the toughest man. In Africa, we are facing some of the worst droughts in living memory. People drinking out of murky rivers and dirty pools, and that's why we distribute life straws for clean, safe drinking water. Our adventures are so intertwined with Africa's wildlife, and that's why we cannot ignore the crisis that's happening with regard to the poaching of our rhinos and elephants. It's unacceptable, and that's why the Kingsley Holgate Foundation also includes community conservation education work as part of these adventures into Africa. As an expedition team, we've been able to journey to every single country on the African continent, to include all of her island states. I guess we're just an ordinary bunch of adventurers with an extraordinary passion for Mama Africa and her people. The Kingsley Holgate Foundation will continue to use these Land Rover journeys to save and improve lives. It's a clear objective.
Thank you. Sorry guys, we don't normally play so many videos, but I just thought it was an easy way to get it across, given the surrounding noise and such like. But we'll open the floor now to any questions, possibly 2 or 3 questions. And yeah, I think we've stepped away from the campfire. You can no longer hear that lion in the background, that cackle of a hysterical cackle of a hyena, and we're back here at the Prince. Thanks, Ron.
You can imagine going through a border post in Africa is a tedious, tiresome, frustrating thing. With all the border posts they go through, they've developed some techniques and to get through the border post, I'd like King to share a couple of the humorous sides of it with his good cop, bad cop son Ross, and how they get through some of the border posts and the roadblocks.
Okay, Ron, yeah, great question. You know, as you all know, Africa is about humor. Africans love humor. And, you know, if you're going to be like all uptight, a bit South African-y, you know, it's not going to go well for you at some of the borders because people pick it up, you know. So over the years, we sort of developed some strategies. One, of course, is the right to sight. You know, when that guy can hardly fill in the passport details and everything, oh, a simple pair of glasses go a long way to then everybody go. Sometimes you'll see that there's a whole lot of mums hanging around the border post, so you can do a bit of malaria work and then instantly drop you through, and you've smuggled all the nets. You know, but sometimes it can get really rough. And you know what it's like when you get that rather large fella with the wrinkles down the back of his shaved neck, and he's got one of those machines with a curve, you know, magazine. And then once when this happened to me in the Congo, it was actually on the border between Zambia and the Congo, so English was spoken. The devil got into me. And I winked to my son Ross, who he and I are like this. He knows exactly when I'm up to trouble. And the devil got into me. And I looked at this fellow with a curved magazine. And I developed an instant huckle, a stutter. And I said, I called him to just what you do when you find somebody with that AK for curved magazine. So what I did, I glaring at him with big eyes and a bit of a tummy and a bit of a trembling moustache. I called him, yes, sir. You see? And then I'll keep it short. Then what I did, I simply indicated to the refrigerator, to the cool box. And I said, sir, would you? And that's where it's important to. And then, of course, my son would give me the odd clap on the back of the head, you know, to get the word out. It's important to use an international word. So I said, well, would you use, sir, would you care for a would you, sir, care for a Pepsi? And he said, Vamos, get out of here. So to answer your question, Ron, there's always room for a bit of humor. Maybe one or two more questions, then we'll end this. Yes, sir.
What happened to the water then, the lenses? Did that go with? On the picture.
The water?
The water in the gloves.
Is there still water in the glove?
No, it's Tuesday.
It's dried out last Tuesday. But you know what is interesting? You see those life rings. Yeah. What the hell would Land Rovers be doing with some life rings on? We were talking about this yesterday. So as we were tracking the entire outline of Africa in this World First expedition, on the coast of Gabon, in a very remote area, we came across an entire ship, a ghost ship. There was a rope ladder hanging down the side. We went in, not a person. Went in, and we got some beautiful maps, some lovely, you know, charts, navigational charts. And then there were these round life rafts. So we said, let's take a souvenir for each Land Rover. But where to put them? The landings are so full. So we wandered down back onto the beach. We just hooked one life raft on the front of each Land Rover. I have two of them in my bar at home. So that's why when you see pictures of these old landings, people think, were you afraid of drowning? But that's actually the story. That's what happened there. One more question, one or two more questions. Yes, this gentleman here.
He's a really practical joker, takes it to the extreme. King, tell us a story with the Nando's, the boss of Nando's.
So we have a reputation for practical jokes. I think on these long journeys you need to keep smiling and laughing and everything. So Robbie Brosen, who you might know, delightful fellow, who's been so supportive of us over the years, he brought some young presidents, organization association, YPO people on a journey. They'd never camped before. They met us and we did malaria work for the day and some soccer games and some really good stuff. They all got sunburned noses and everything, and they just slept wild in the bush. There was no facilities. And the next morning they were brushing their teeth, standing in the galoon, brushing the teeth like an old galoon, like a little goon. And Ronnie and Rob Brosen said to me, and he swears a bit, you know, so I won't emulate him entirely. He said, you know, Kingsley, those people we helped yesterday, they will never remember my name. I'll never be on Facebook. I'll never get an Instagram. But it just feels so effing right. Robbie Brosen went on from then to establish Goodbye Malaria, who we support and work with in southern Mozambique. But when we were doing this journey to track the outline of Africa, he said, could I come and visit you? He said, I'll open up a few Nando's in Nigeria. So how about if I just popped in and met with you guys? So I said, no, Robbie, that would be absolutely great. So we flew and he said, could you provide someone to pick me up at the hotel? So, you know, I've learned that wealthy people, by and large, don't carry any money. You know, they just got cards and stuff. You know, they don't all have $100 hidden down here and stuff like anyway. So we thought, oh, Robbie's coming to Nigeria, eh? And just coming to Nigeria, you know, if you haven't been before, you've got like a little bit of, you know, a sense of anticipation. So I arranged a taxi driver and an off-duty cop to pick him up. And this is gospel, not a word of a lie. I know it sounds unbelievable, but the cop happened to be an off-duty. He happened to do drama. He was a drama student. I couldn't have found a better bloke. So they go to pick up Robbie, and no sooner are they down the road leading out of Lagos, and the drama student puts his gun in Robbie's back and says, "The money." and Robbie said, "Do you take American Express?" Oh, how sorry, Robbie, that I'm sharing this with everybody. So he said, well, there's only one way. We take you to police. They go to a mansion on the outskirts of Lagos. There's these big steps. Robbie, with a gun in his back like that, is marched up the steps. And in the front room of this massive sort of luxury home is a bar. And there's some music, and there's some girls with mini skirts up to here, and they're playing pool and stuff. And so Robbie starts to feel a wee bit relaxed, and then they offer him a beer. And after about 10, 15 minutes, he says, Chief of Police is ready for you. They march him down a dimly lit corridor, open a huge door. There's a massive bedroom with a big bed inside. It's very dimly lit. They slam the door behind him. He stands there. I'm lying under the duvet. And I've got a gorilla mask on. And I leap out. And I grab him and I pick him off the ground. I said, Robbie Brosen, what the hell brings you to Nigeria? But you know, I've played so many practical jokes, and Yolandi has caught me on a massive practical joke once. So I think I should share one practical joke that is against me. So I'd been catching everybody for so many years. So a rubber duck went over me on the Zambezi, and I got foot entrapment and it messed the knee up. So for a long time, I was limping. And we had 2 doctors on expedition, on another expedition. And they said, listen, this is ridiculous. We are going to pay for you to fly to Cape Town. We pay the flight. We're going to give you a private ward, and we're going to give you a bionic knee. I should have smelt a rat, but I didn't. So I flew to Cape Town. I should have smelt a rat when the GP said to me, you know, we've had people like you before. I've put a liter of Jamison's into the little cupboard next to your bed, because sometimes people fall out of bed because they haven't. I should have smelt a rat then, but I didn't. You're in hospital. And then I went into the operating table, came out. And as I came round, I thought, there's too many people around. There's too many, and there's too many cameras. And a sweet little nursing sister came up to me and she swung around my card. And she said, Queensley, instead of Kingsley, Kingsley, congratulations on the successful sex change. So my hand shot down under the sheet, whoop, to find, fortunately, things were in order. But they said, and your test, with which they removed the sheet from under my bed, and there was a perfect pair of boobs on a black lacy bra. They'd taken those implants and they just put them there, and they were like to see. Do you know that within 10 minutes, it was on News 24 that explorer Kingsley Holgate has had a successful sex change? So, yeah, you know, these expressions sometimes do rely on a lot of humor. Thank you for sharing that with me. Maybe one more question, possibly.
Yes. Surely it must be quite a scary experience.
What, the sex change?
I've never thought of that possibly having happened. But on your travels, what other dangers, what scary things have you experienced?
So your name again is?
Steph.
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 Steph asks, what sort of dangerous experiences one's possibly encountered? Well, obviously, ironically, they're not from wildlife. You know, so yes, a croc has torn the rubber duck apart, and you know, you have elephants in camp and lions in camp and bumps from hippo and all that sort of thing. That's sort of par for the course, I think. But of course, the danger comes from humans and from child soldiers and that sort of thing. And I think I should just answer you, Steph, by saying I'm not brave.
Don't believe.
So I really shit myself sometimes. I promise you. But I remember on one occasion, I'm just taking a random occasion, is we were in the Central African Republic and we were captured by a warlord. And he was a dinka. So he was easy 6 inches taller than I looked at him like that, shook hands like this. And you know, he was full of scarifications. And round his neck, he had fetishes, like, you know, old baboon skulls and shotgun cartridges and stuff like that. And I could see this could well be the last day of my life, and all the people around him and everything. But I had a translator with me. And might I add, Steph, I think the only reason I'm standing talking to you here today is because we have a policy called the empty seat. If we don't travel with local Africans, local knowledge, if you travel just with all pick and pay, if you don't invite Africa into your space, you're inviting trouble sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. So always try and have a space for local Africans. I had this great translator from Guinea-Conakry. And I said to him, my friend, you're going to have to translate very clearly and very carefully, otherwise we are going to die. I'm going to take 2 steps and I'm going to give the warlord a big hug. And while I'm hugging him, you must say, I come in, I will talk and you translate. But if you lose your cool, we're going to die. Are you ready? He looks at me like a nakapi. So I take 2 steps and I just give this guy a massive hug, like a bear hug. And I look up and like this. Man, he hadn't washed for a long time. And I said, brother, probably. And I said, my friend, we come in peace. Eh? Look in the Land Rover, mosquito net, eyeglasses for people in need. You know, do we look like mercenaries? We come in peace. Please treat us kindly. I remember we were telling the story last night. He got one of his men to come forward, bent down, used his back as a table. Where they got a piece of writing paper, I don't know. And he wrote a letter of safe passage and signed his name, and even an old rubber stamp. And we had free passage through those areas. I then met the president, the one that had been chased out of, you know, the South African troops that all got killed in Bangui, the Central African Republic. I met that president. He asked to see me. He said, it's impossible that you've survived and come through the areas that you've just come through. It's impossible. I got frisked and everything. And so all I want to share with you on that thing is, wherever we're in like serious trouble, it's just to be friendly and honest and big hugs and everything. But it was tough when we went to find the most easterly point of Africa, having, of course, done Agulhas, it's the obvious one. Tunisia, the northernmost point. The westerlymost point of Africa is a nudist colony. So I had to say to the team, what? As we walked out to the most westerly point. But the most easterly point You know, when you look at a map of Africa, you see the Horn of Africa, and you presume that that is the most easterly point of the continent. But you actually have to come down 115 k's, and a little whale tail sticks out to sea, and that's when the sun rises. Yeah, so there, of course, is the point that you would take would be the most easterly, but you come down just 115 k's, and Rasafun, the most easterly point, sticks out. Thanks, Ron. And then that's the most easterly point. So we had to hire a private army, about 20 blokes, 2 machine guns, travel mostly at night. We got there. Wasn't another soul, man. It was so beautiful. We built a little ECP vine, you know, the Zulu word for a little pile of stones, like a Scottish can spit on the stones, propitiate the spirits. Looked out at sea. We'd made it to Africa's most easterly point, which meant that we'd made it to the center, the lowest, the highest, Kili, of course, Asol, the lower, these 7 points. And we'd made it to the geographic center of the continent. So, but coming back from the most easterly point, we got caught. And we're talking about dangerous experiences. I'm on the same track. So we got caught. And it's not great when you get introduced to the general who's going to cut your heads off. So he's introduced as such. This is the guy that's going to cut your heads off. And on every expedition, we carry a scroll of peace and goodwill. These beautiful books are bound by Melville and Moon in leather. Swati knows them so well, in leather and canvas. And the opening page is us sitting as a family with Madiba. And this guy looked at that, and then we showed him pictures of what his own easterly point looked like. I said, this was America be a hotel. I said, you live in a fantastic country. And these pictures are of us helping your people, right to sight, water purifying, which they desperately need there and everything like that. And you could see he was just starting to soften, you know, oh. And then he said, okay, if you're not Al-Shabaab spies, I know who you are, he said. You are illegal South African geologists come to rape us of our wealth. And as he said that, Sheila, my partner, who was the only girl on the journey, I could just see her stiffen. Why? What would you do if you'd gone to the most easterly point of Africa and risked your life to do so? You'd pick up a pebble, wouldn't you? The floor of the landings was just pebbles, souvenirs. And I knew if those buggers went down there, they'd say, oh, rock samples, geologists. So she made an excuse. She shot downstairs like that. She gathered all the pebbles, hid them in her underwear like a brrr upstairs. But while she was down there doing that, she found the book that I'm going to present to you and keep for you when I get back home, which is the journey attached to that vehicle. She found that book lying behind the seat. It's called Dispatches from the Outside Edge, from a journey to track the entire outline of Africa. And she brought the book back, and there's this big picture of me on the cover. And the guy looked at that. I said, let me write in it for you. I was so bloody nervous, I blotched it. And I wrote his name, I can't quite remember, okay, and he shut the book. He said, I said, but then don't you think, sir, now that we're all friends, you should write in the scroll of peace and goodwill, maybe even where Madiba wrote, because what your country needs more than anything else is peace and goodwill. And you already wrote, you are lucky to be alive. Oh my God! So those are just some of the more sort of dangerous things. Ron, I'd like to just end with a simple story, if I may. And I was once at Cape Agulhas, the southernmost point of Africa, which you all know so well, where the Indian and Atlantic Oceans meet. The Cape of Storms, that old beautiful lighthouse there. You've been to the lighthouse? Who hasn't been to Cape Agulhas? Cape Agulhas, the southernmost tip of Africa. All been, lovely. You go there on the next visit, Roberto. I need to go. No, for sure. So that's where the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic meet. And there's a beautiful old lighthouse there, fashioned on the old Pharaoh's lighthouse of Alexandria, ancient Alexandria in Egypt, before the time of Christ, had tens of thousands of books in its library. And I was sitting there writing a book called Africa in the Footsteps of the Great Explorers. And Don Pinnock, the editor of Getaway magazine, came to visit. I'm almost over, by the way, guys. I've literally got 2 more minutes. Don Pinnock, the editor of Getaway magazine, came to visit. And we were chatting, and he said, Kingsley, How come you are so privileged to go on all these journeys and to have gone on every country on the African continent? I said, what? He said, yes, privileged. I said, Don, it's like this. I walked down to the beach. Now, those of you who know Cape Agulhas will know that the entire beach is littered with tens of thousands of time-washed pebbles. Beautiful. I went in and I got 7 pebbles too. I put them on the bar counter. We were drinking from an enamel mug, a drink called Dark and Foamy. I said, Don, how old are you? He said, 54. I said, I'll give you 4 years, free for mahala. Let's pretend you're 50. And the 7 pebbles that I've laid out on the bar counter, some of you would have heard this story. Each pebble, let's pretend it is worth 10 summers. We use the word summers because it's nicer than years, eh? Palm trees bending in the wind in Zanzibar, summers. 7 pebbles on the bar counter. Don, you've already had 5 of them, 50. I said, no point in looking in the rearview mirror, my friend. These old defenders, you know, when they've clapped a few mapanis and they're all cracked like spider's web and a bit wobbly, you concentrate on the road ahead. I said, 5 pebbles are gone, but I chucked them out where the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic mix, zoop. 2 pebbles left on the bar counter that night, drinking out of the enamel mug. I pointed to that last pebble. This is my last story of the evening. I pointed to that last pebble and I said, you know, I'm actually a bit sick and tired of meeting people that say when we. They said, you know, when we've sold the business, when the kids have retired, when we've got enough money and everything. And of course, listen, I'm saying 7 pebbles. Fortunately, these days, modern medicine, people here are going to have more than 10 pebbles. So please, this is no big religious conviction. Just talking about pebbles. So I said, Don, you know that last pebble, there's actually no guarantee. You might not be strong enough to do all the stuff you want. So I took that 7th pebble and I threw it out to join the other 5 where the 2 oceans meet. That left 1 pebble on the bar counter that night. I took the pebble and I gave it to Don. I said, Don, let this just be a reminder. Yes, you have to do good business. Yes, you have to drive a decent car. You should look after your kids. I'm not suggesting you impoverish yourself. But just remember that your most valuable asset is time. And it's how you use that time. I said, that pebble in your pocket is going to become such a bloody nuisance. It's going to get caught up with your Land Rover keys. You're going to get home late. Or business cards, not sure where you got from there in the morning. Take the bloody pebble. Becomes like a rosary bead. Becomes, you know, patinaed with time. You're rubbing this damn pebble. You see? I said, that's what you've got. I never thought another thing about it. I took off on that journey to track the entire outline of Africa in this vehicle. This very vehicle. This was my one. This is the one I drove. And did the whole journey. Of course, I was cheating. I had a pebble in my pocket. All the way around Africa, you know, up the east, all the way down the east coast. And then when you cross that river, there's so much trouble at the moment. The river that separates southern Tanzania from northern Mozambique, the rebel activity that's happening there at the moment, which is being stopped. Who by? Not by the Wagner Group, but by the Rwandans. Crossed the ferry. The ferry, when it went back the other way, sank. Sitting around the campfire that night, a big fellow walks into the firelight with a big beard and introduces himself. My name is Big John Wells, he says. I said, yes. He'd come there in his own diesel, own car, own time, own efforts, own supplies, everything. He said, I said, what brought you here, my friend? He said, I read an article by Don Pinnock, your friend, from the Getaway magazine, who wrote an article called The 7 Pebbles of Life. And in the firelight, he stuck his hand in his pocket and he took out a pebble. And he held it against the firelight. He says, you'll see it's a bit cracked. He said, I've just recovered from a bloody serious stroke. And he said, I'm quite determined to use my time. He said, I'm coming with you. I want to help with the malaria work and the conservation stuff and everything. We've been good friends ever since. The pebbles of life. And I think with all the stuff we've talked about, it really is just this. It's about how we use our lives and everything. And seeing this much traveled pebble was in my pocket. If you don't mind, I'd like to give it to Adrian, knowing you've got far more than 7, brother. Here we are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. That's a great pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Okay, Ron. I think that's done for. Thank you very much once again for kind hospitality and for all of you for being here and sharing this campfire. I appreciate it.